Hey, all you rad dads out there.
Hi, Dustin. Welcome to the Rad Dad Show. We're going to start this interview like we always start. Who are you?
Well, my name is Dustin, but I go by Grim Deeds. That's my sort of artist alter ego. It's a punk rock project that I've been doing for the past 7 years, mainly as like a one-man band. And I guess you would consider it pop punk mainly, kind of a weird underground, almost kind of black metal vibe to it because it's very DIY. And I've released 23 albums so far. So I've done a lot of music and collaborations with bands and different places. And I'm a skateboarder, and I'm a teacher, and I'm a dad. So those are the essentials.
There we go. Yeah, that's why you're here. If you care to share the name, age of kids.
Yeah. So I have a son, Logan. Logan is about to turn 6, and that's what he looks like.
There we go. Awesome.
Yeah.
6-year-old. Yes, my son is 10. So yeah.
Okay.
I know it's coming.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a rad dad?
I would say weird dad, maybe, with rad being like an alternative synonym for weird. I do weird stuff. I'm into weird hobbies, and my tastes are not what I guess the regular dads are into in our community. And my son is aware of this. He knows that I love skateboarding and rock music and crazy music, and he knows about Grim Deeds, and he knows that I have like a weird sense of humor, that I say things that are strange, and that I act goofy and stuff like that. So I would say I'm a weird dad, and if people approve of skating and punk rock and stuff like that, I guess it's rad in a sense. But I'm gonna stick with weird mostly.
I like that. Maybe we'll rebrand for your episode, the Weird Dad Show. What makes a rad dad? What are some of the traits that you think kind of make rad dad according to your definition there?
I think it's important for rad dads to demonstrate that they're willing to do what they love and what they're passionate about, even if it's not like a mainstream thing, and they're just going to do it for themselves and do it anyway, and have goals that they set for themselves and whatever their passions are, and follow those passions. I also think it's important for the rad dad to be really in tune with their children's interests and to help them, by supporting their interests and not like trying to steer them in one direction or another necessarily, but just exposing them to a lot of different things, different aspects of life, different potential interests, and then seeing what sticks and kind of paying attention to what your child is getting stoked on. And then when you seize on that opportunity and say like, oh cool, well, I'm going to get into it as well. Like Logan's really into Pokemon, and I didn't know anything about Pokemon really, but now I know a lot about Pokemon, and I know evolutions and all the different regions, and I know about Pokemon Go, and I know about Battle Academy, and I know about I could probably list about 100 or so characters just from memory. But he's always correcting me, he's the expert, and like, so I kind of let him be the expert, but show him like, yeah, this is cool, let's get into it together. And I think it's cool to have, to take an interest in whatever your child's into. I think that's what makes a rad dad in the end, is showing that support.
Yeah, and that's a common answer, a common theme that we see from the guests on the show is like is that just being there and kind of being that supportive. And is it really that easy?
I think so for me. Maybe it's part of my personality. Maybe it comes from being a teacher too, but you want to honor what kids are stoked on and help them develop their skills and feel like a sense of accomplishment. I always get a really great feeling out of like when whatever I contribute to the conversation makes that person feel more affirmed or proud of themselves, especially if it's a kid. Like that's a rad feeling. As a dad, it's a rad feeling when your son feels proud because he made a basket. And even though I can see his basketball skills are very minimal at this point, like he's stoked to get the basket. He's stoked to do 20 dribbles, and like, and I'm like, yeah, always giving that positive encouragement, I think is important. And setting some kind of positive example and how you react to things and how you take all the wins and losses, and trying to show them, that there's going to be struggles no matter what you're into. If you have goals, in order to reach a worthwhile goal, you're going to have to struggle. And being that person who's there to support and like provide positive encouragement, I think is a great role, as a dad and as a teacher, because it's just, it's like its own reward. And certainly it makes a difference for the kids I work with and for my son, to feel that encouragement.
And then you kind of mentioned, following the passions. Why is that important as a dad, to follow your own own path? And what does that do?
Well,
does that influence your kids? Is it just more kind of like a role model type thing, and they see that you're stoked on things? And
yeah, I mean, I think in society and in the world, in order to meet your own personal goals, or even to have personal goals, you need to have some kind of sense of self and develop like some self-confidence to know like whatever you're into is great. If you're into it, if you have some community around it, and if you have some purpose behind it, then it's good enough. I think a lot of people question that about themselves, and particularly if you grow up in a situation where you are not receiving encouragement for whatever you're passionate about. And that was kind of my situation. Like growing up, there were plenty of people in my life who weren't stoked on skateboarding, not stoked on the kind of music I was into, and didn't think it was worthwhile, didn't think it was worth pursuing. And I always fought against that. I think in a way it made me more motivated to pursue it, and it's kind of like, even now I'm in my 40s and I'm still doing this because I was saying the other day to my friend, every time I put out a CD, it's kind of like a little merit badge that I'm giving myself to prove like, yeah, like I'm still doing it. So what? Like, I still love it and I'm going to keep doing it. And I think that there's some satisfaction you can get out of that. I don't know. I think who knows what it would have been like if I had lots and more positive encouragement around what I was into growing up. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I would have been satisfied with less or something. But like now I've got that fire in me. It's just like I have to do it. It's like I have a point to prove. And I think that there's a way you can balance that, like ambition, with having a positive role model, someone who can support and encourage you. And that's what I think is very important for me as a dad. I don't know if that answers the question, but
no, it gets at that whole theme and stuff. And it's kind of also, I guess, maybe why I do what I do with Rad Dads, and why I started it. It was kind of, my dad committed suicide a number of years ago, so he wasn't really part of my life, and my mom and I had a fractured relationship. And so maybe it's me kind of trying to, I don't know, trying to maybe get some validation some way, maybe in a deep level, but I just having those goals and following the passions, we try to empower dads to do that. It's like, yeah, we're all into kind of skateboarding, we're all into like punk stuff. And I remember growing up, like people like, you listen to punk, it's like amateur or stupid. I'm like, I don't know, man. It kind of gave me like this worldview of like, a different worldview about, well, at least the punk rock I listen to, community, and it's like this positive kind of vibe that we put out in the world. And that kind of, I want to see my son see me as having goals and passions, and I want him to kind of find his own. And I think it's easy to do that if you have your own, right? And kind of being that role model there. And so I think it's really important and that's why you're here, man.
Yeah. Well, you said something, I'm very sorry to hear about your dad, but it kind of solidifies this idea I've had all along, which is that a lot of people in our community, skaters and punk rockers, come from damaged backgrounds. Like my background was like that. My parents fought all the time, and there was a very chaotic, sort of traumatic home environment for us growing up. There was violence and there was screaming and yelling and just poor examples, of adulthood being displayed all the time. And I don't blame either of them. I just think they were just not equipped with the tools and resources that they needed to thrive. And that sucks, but it's like, it is what it is. And then, there were divorces, there were like step families, a disapproving stepdad, didn't like skating, didn't like punk. and then that marriage also ended, and then it's just, you know, one thing after another, man. And so you seek like chosen family when you're in that situation. And that's why this whole punk thing and skateboarding, I think, means so much to me. It was a surrogate family for me, you know. And I love my mom, and my dad passed away actually just in December. And
Sorry.
so that kind of like, you know, you lose a parent, it makes you reassess your life in a lot of deep kind of ways. And also it definitely helps me to focus on what I want to accomplish as a dad and what I want to offer my son, you know, in a different way than what I experienced growing up.
Yeah, and that's you know, one of the things that kind of keeps me going. It's not really the word, the phrase, but you know, just like a very reflective father, I think, in the fact that I do a lot of the things that I do. I try to do, I guess, maybe the exact opposite of what my dad would have done.
Yeah.
Right, you know, and my stepdad. So I had a really similar thing, you know, like my parents were together, separated. So, you know, my mom had three kids, me, my brother and sister. I was the oldest. She took care of us. Dad wasn't really around. And then, you know, my mom met someone, remarried stepdad who was, you know, had some really positive qualities, but also, you know, a alcoholic, would get angry, you know, but, you know, he was very supportive of us, you know, provided a roof and food and all those sorts of things. So again, like you, I don't fault him or anything, but yeah, it's, and then that relationship dissolved, and my mom passed away 2 years ago. So now I'm you know, I have a 10-year-old who has no grandparents, and it's just like a weird kind of, because I grew up really close with my grandparents, and it's like, oh man, how do I navigate this? You know, he's not going to have these sorts of experiences, and so I try to provide him with those sorts of things.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the funny thing is my dad was actually very supportive of skating and punk and stuff, and he was open-minded to all that stuff, but he still, you know, set a lot of bad examples in terms of how to like deal with life and deal with stress and deal with conflict. And there is just like, you know, like he built me a ramp, you know. I had a little mini ramp in the backyard, no coping, just like a 4-foot you know, ramp. And he bought me on my boards. He introduced me to cool music and stuff. And he grew up rough. He's from like a very rural, poverty-stricken part of Virginia where I'm from, and you know, a lot of drugs, a lot of crime, lots of poverty and just ignorance and backcountry craziness. And that's how he grew up. It's one of his first memories was his mom being murdered. Like she like was murdered by someone, and she like hid him under the bed, and then he was adopted by like, you know, an adopted family. Dad was alcoholic, and just, you know, crazy gnarly childhood. And my mom was like the opposite. She's like a sheltered army brat. My grandfather was a colonel in World War II and had this like illustrious military career, and so she's like this privileged but sheltered person, and he's like this wild animal, you know, from like total opposite end of the spectrum. And then they get together, what could go wrong, you know? Like, so, you know, they were trying to figure out their lives when I was born, and it was just a struggle all the way up until it ended. And then like the stepdad thing for me was, he was a Harvard Law School graduate lawyer in a small town and had like a sort of social reputation to keep. And my like skater bullshit wasn't fitting into his, you know, definition of what was acceptable. So I remember I used to sneak like my blind jeans in my backpack and like change in the bathroom and wear skater clothes at school because I wasn't allowed to wear it at home. So I had like a lot of weird like identity crisis issues there for a while, because I like wanted to be myself, but I couldn't outwardly express it, you know, in that family. And so that's always kind of been part of who I am, just like having to have an acceptable version of myself and then like the real version of myself. So that's kind of like the Grim Deeds thing. It's like Grim Deeds isn't my expression of everything weird and everything extreme that's inside my head, and outwardly too, like with the artwork and the character, I try to really lean into that. But then I'm a teacher, I'm a dad, I live in a affluent little suburb in the Bay Area of California, and I have to like do my role correctly. So there's always like, it kind of harkens back to that time of trying to, you know, meet everyone else's expectations while fulfilling what's important to me. And so I don't know, for my son, I try to let him know like that I'm gonna support him no matter what. So whatever he's into, he doesn't have to feel guilty about it or feel weird about it like I did.
And I think that's too like some of the underlying themes that we do with Rad Dads that you kind of touched on a little bit. It's like, you know, we try to like, you know, like if you look at what we do and like our events, like it's stuff that I would do anyways. You know, it's still skateboards. We host like a skateboard night. I sing in a punk rock cover band, Bad Religion cover band. We called ourselves Dad Religion. So we've hosted a few like all ager gigs where it's like bring the kids out, but also you could have a beer while watching some punk rock. You're introducing your kids to punk rock, all of those things that, you know, so I guess what I'm trying to say is like being myself, right? And I never, you know, I want to continue to be myself and not have to be someone different. And if that makes sense. I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, I think too, it's cool that you have like sustained interest in hobbies and like a kind of culture that you're a part of, a community that you're a part of that has remained important to you throughout your life. Like I always think it's essential for anybody to have something that they're really into. You know, like I just agree. You know, it's just who I am as a person, but like I think having that purpose in life is very important, and not just being like, I don't know, like a casual sort of participant in your life. Like I think you need to have some kind of focus to get stoked on, and it really helps with life, like the ups and downs in life. If you always have that thing that you can indulge in or have that outlet to work on that's within your own control. Because for me, a big part of my childhood was like lack of control. Like I couldn't control what was happening around me, so I wanted to have something that was mine, and like skating worked like that and music worked like that. And it's, as I learned to like write songs and stuff like that, it was very empowering. So I think it's cool to be able to retreat within yourself and have outlets that you can share and form a community around it, because it's like really affirming to who you are, you know, when you're able to display that. And it takes a lot of work, obviously, too, but it's work that you can feel good about at the end of the day.
For sure. How has fatherhood changed you?
I think it's made me more aware in general, aware of myself and aware of other people and other people's struggles. And I think it's humbled me to the fact that, like, you know, I'm not so great as an individual. We have a lot in common with each other, you know, other parents, other dads, other human beings. So I kind of look at life a bit differently. Whereas maybe growing up, I felt like there was this separation between me and the rest of the world. You know, I felt like I was this rebellious guy, independent thinker. And now I realize, like, that's really not so much the case. It's more, you know, I have these specific hobbies and interests, but I can relate to pretty much anybody. Like, you know, if I try, you can find some common ground. And I think it's made me less, I don't know, ego-centered or less selfish or something like that. Because before I address my own needs, I have to check everything else off the list. I have to make sure my son has everything he needs, all the attention he needs, my wife, you know, my family. So the sense of responsibility, I think, is a big difference. Whereas before it's like, you know, a lot of that stuff felt optional. And now it's not. It's like, these are the priorities. And like, there's certain limits that I have to sort of live within. And it can feel confining at times. Like, if I'm honest, it can feel kind of like I'm in a nice prison, you know, like a very comfortable prison, but there are certain boundaries and I can't go outside of those boundaries. So you have to just thrive within wherever your little ecosystem is. And I don't want to make it sound negative, but, you know, like, I can't just go out to shows, you know, and come back late. You know, I can't go on road trips and go tour. I mean, maybe some dads feel comfortable doing that, but I don't. That's why the Grim Deeds thing works for me, because I basically do it all from home, and it's all, you know, everything depends on me being present and being available, like career, family, fatherhood, like all that stuff that's what I mainly do in life. And the other stuff is like important, but it has to, you know, take a back seat, I guess.
Right. You know, it's also, you know, finding that balance, right? You have so many things on the go, it seems, and it's like, you know, that's that's important, and we've interviewed a lot of musicians, touring musicians. They say the same sort of thing. They have to kind of provide for their family, but by providing for their family, they have to be on the road. But being on the road is being away from their family. So it's this kind of this lifestyle that's different than most, for sure. Did you have any fears about being a dad?
Totally. I didn't even want to be a dad. I was really against it for a long time, and I used to always say like these very sardonic comments about it, like, oh well, I think it's good to have 0 children, like that's my goal, and like I think it was a combination of fear that I would fail, because I felt like my parents failed in a lot of important ways. I mean, I don't want to, Mom, if you're watching this, like I love you, but, like there were a lot of failures that I witnessed, like adults failing to set the kind of example that they should have, and I felt susceptible to that. I also knew that, because of what I'd been through, like there were certain things about myself that I wasn't really happy about. I was like ashamed of, like sometimes the way I would react to things, like the anger that would come out. I was afraid that I was going to repeat some of those mistakes as a dad. And I also just was like aware that everything was going to change, and I didn't want that. I wanted to have some control over my life still, and I wanted to have options. And most of my friends, even still today, are bachelors, like my age, but not married, and do, they work and stuff, but they kind of choose their own adventure, when it comes to their free time. And I was like, I'm not ready to give up all that stuff. Like I still want to do, I was really focused on music, and that was really important to me. And yeah, so I didn't want to be a parent. Mostly it was fear, though. I think just fear of failure and fear of the change that was coming. But what basically it came down to is I understood that it was something that it was natural, and that my wife, she was basically at that age where it's like, okay, biological clock is telling you we need to do this now. And I didn't want my selfishness to be the reason for not having kids, and I didn't want to prevent her from having that experience, because I love my wife, and we've been together a long time, and it's like, all right, I just gotta go for it. But I experienced some pretty heavy like depression and emotional and mental health problems like early on when I became a dad, just like the loss of sleep, loss of freedom, feeling like lack of control, and overwhelmed by the situation. And like it was gnarly. Like I reached some really dark moments in those early years, but yeah, everyone kept telling me, oh, it does get easier, I mean, it does in certain ways, but I think the reason it does is because you become stronger. It's like sink or swim. You don't want to fail, so you just try harder. You develop more strategies. And so I overcame like a pretty dark depression, like just through my own like investigating what could work for me. Like I looked into therapy, but I don't know if you've ever tried that, but it's like really difficult here in the United States to even find somebody, and like to work it around your schedule and get your insurance to pay for it and stuff. So that was kind of a dead end, my attempts to find that. And then like I read about cognitive behavior therapy and stoicism and different sort of mindsets, and I just read a few books, and I was like, you know what, this actually makes sense to me. And I started to like apply the teachings, and it slowly over time started to work, and I felt good about that. It's like, all right, I didn't blow it, because I felt like I was like in the beginning just kind of spiraling down into this dark place. Luckily Logan was so young, he wasn't aware of what was going on, but everybody else was. Everybody's like, Jesus Christ, like he's really like, it was it was bad. It was bad enough to put a damper on everything. I think that like I said before, you get stronger and more resilient. That's a big change that I think without the fatherhood component, I probably wouldn't be that person, because there's nothing else that can sort of force you to change in those ways. There's no other impetus that I can think of that is so demanding that forces you to become a better person, unless you want to just fail, which I don't want to do.
Right. Well, a lot of that what you said is just kind of like really synonymous with me too, like just analogous in the fact that I was terrified. My son's mother and I aren't together anymore, but when we got together, we were both professionals, career oriented maybe, and we like to travel. And so it was like, that was kind of, I thought at the time that was going to be our life. You know, we both agreed that we were going to have kids and travel the world, do all basically, you know, like the freedom, like you said, you know, do the things that you kind of want to do. You had the money and all that. And yeah, she kind of changed, like, no, you know, I kind of want a kid. I'm like, what? Where'd this kind of going to come from? And then I remember when she told me that she was pregnant, I didn't have the best reaction. It was like instant panic. And yeah, I didn't, you know, luckily, I guess, didn't have, you know, it become depressed or anything. And it's been great. But yeah, I had a fear, a big fear, and for all those similar reasons, you know, fear I would fail, and my dad wasn't there. I didn't really have a role model. I didn't really know how to be a dad. And you know, there's sometimes I even kind of catch myself, you know, acting similar to like what my stepdad was. And I'm like, man, I gotta check myself. Like, why am I reacting like this? I'm reacting exactly the same way as my stepdad would. And I remember being in that situation, being, you're a fucking asshole right now. So and I was like, oh, okay, I gotta react differently. And like, it's just crazy. But yeah, so I'm glad you kind of got out of that. And you mentioned like the cognitive therapy kind of stuff. You know, Jim, like we were talking before with Jim Lindbergh with Pennywise, I was trying to tell you, he was kind of talking about one of the books. I can't remember the author right now, but similar type story. Like, yeah, just that sort of stuff has worked for him.
Well, his lyrics are very centered around that kind of Stoic philosophy and the cognitive behavioral therapy like tenets, which is basically the overarching theme is that everyone experiences negative emotions, but how you think about those emotions and how you decide to deal with them is really up to you. And that's where you have the power and the control, because the emotion, once you feel it coming on, if you develop the skill of thinking like, okay, I'm feeling the emotion, let me assess the situation and see like what's the reason. And then once I know the reason, decide how am I going to react to it? And am I going to ruminate on it for a long time, or am I going to just let it pass and move on, you know? And so you kind of get better at recovering from negative things. The problem with depression, at least for me, is that once the negativity starts, it just like spreads throughout you, and then it just lingers. And that lingering part is the depression. And so like what the cognitive behavioral therapy stuff did for me was it gave me the ability to sort of stop it and recognize like, okay, this is negative, but like you can see that it's, you know, not a big deal. You know, most of the time it's not really a big deal. And it's like, if you can kind of train yourself to take things less personally and just sort of see things in a non-depressed person kind of way, where it's not that everybody's against you. There's no conspiracy theory operating. It's just how you're choosing to react. And sometimes the depression reaction is like, I interpret it as like, you want control. And so if nothing else is working, at least I can control how bad I feel. It's kind of like this demented control, you know. It's like, well, I always have the power to make things worse, you know, but that's a terrible way to
yeah.
Yeah, I think like what you were saying about your dad and stepdad, like I catch myself sometimes, like Logan is the one who really keeps me accountable to not be a dick. And if I start to get that way, like he, at least now, like he can communicate and say like, hey, like why are you being so, you know, strict or whatever? And I'm constantly questioning myself and like trying to stay on point. And, you know, you're always going to make mistakes and stuff like that. But I feel at least good that, you know, most of Logan's core memories are going to be of me being like this pretty relatable dad who he can easily communicate with and who's honest, and I'll admit if I screwed up. And I think that's important, because like, I don't know how it was for you, but maybe our generation, like adults weren't really in the practice of apologizing to kids or saying like, I screwed up, sorry, like I should do better next time. Like that was not part of the adult, you know, lingo. It was more like, you know, deal with it, I'll give you something to cry about, or like,
yeah, exactly,
this is how it is, you need to, you know, like I'm the one who's in control, you know, that kind of stuff.
Kids should be seen and not heard.
Yeah, or just like, you know, like they ultimately have the control. And I think, and I've learned this as a teacher too, the number one way to build resentment in a student is to force them, and to only say like, the reason that you have to do this is because I say so. Like you automatically lose respect that way. And as a parent, you can't just like totally give kids every option in every situation, but you have to say like, okay, well, here's the reason that I'm choosing this for you. And, you have to kind of have like a balance of, giving choice, and having conversation and dialogue about it, but not just, having the kids rule the show either. That's not a good thing either. So it's very hard, man. It's hard to be a parent. It's hard to be, and that's why I have compassion for my own parents, even though, I could have done without a lot of the gnarliness, but I understand. I think that's another thing about being a dad too, is it gives you a more capacity to forgive and more empathy, those are good qualities, because when you have that, people can act lame and it doesn't piss you off as much, because it's like, all right, well, this guy's clearly having a bad day, or whatever. And like, or his life sucks, or I don't immediately jump to like, oh, fuck you, like, like I'm not taking it personally automatically. Like, you always are taking a step back. I mean, teachers have to do this too, because when students misbehave, it's not because they got up in the morning and they're like, oh, I'm going to get Mr. Teacher, I'm going to make his day miserable, has nothing to do with me. It's all about whatever they're going through. So I think parenthood can give you that perspective if you're reflective.
For sure. And also like just the fact that, we're, as a society, we're more aware of, mental health issues. That's, something, that word mental health, or that phrase, 10, 15 years ago, no one said anything about that. And, people tend to share a bit more and open up, it's getting better. And for sure, I get that. What are the rewarding aspects of being a dad for you?
Well, I mean, having a healthy son who's developing, in all the right ways and meeting all the markers and impressing me with like his skills. I mean, all of that is just a gift, and it's overwhelming to think about sometimes how wonderful it is to have a son who's just, as great as Logan is. And for me, I mean, my situation is very fortunate. I'm a teacher in the Bay Area, where it's impossibly expensive to live, but we live in the house where my wife grew up. So this is her family's home, and they're here a lot of the time. That's kind of part of my struggles in the beginning. It was like, she's different culture, Chinese, and like the whole family was here, when Logan was born, and like people coming and going, telling me what to do, and like, okay, we're gonna do this now, and like I didn't have any choice. I'm like, no, wait. But because we live here, he gets to go to this amazing school. It has a Chinese immersion program in a safe neighborhood. We live in a place where I feel like we're offering him the best possible opportunities, in life, and I feel super fortunate. That's just circumstantial, so I'm really grateful for that. But in terms of the rewards of fatherhood itself, I mean, nothing beats the feeling of just being physically close to your child, like having them, just carrying them, or he doesn't really like to snuggle with me, but like he'll let me cuddle him if we're watching a movie or reading a book together and stuff. And I think it's kind of like, because I'm the dad and he's the only child, I'm kind of like a dad and brother. So we kind of play the role of like, well, roughhouse and get in little arguments, like fight like brothers, but I'm also his dad. And it's a unique thing, man. And it's, I mean, every day I get to hang out with him so much. We spend a lot of time together, and like I'm on spring break, he's on spring break, we're hanging out every day. Like it's nothing to take for granted, that's for sure. I think just the reward of getting that time and watching them grow up and being the dad. Like, he calls me dad, I'm his dad. Like, he relies on me for things. I have the power to make him feel good. I have the ability to encourage him and provide for him all these experiences. I mean, I'm the one who chooses like what song we're going to listen to. I think we'll try Municipal Waste in the car today. art class. And he was into it. He's like, turn it up, I like this. But sometimes he doesn't want what I want. And it's kind of cool to like just offer him like, okay, well, what are you into? Like, oh, you like this terrible I'm a Banana song from YouTube. We have to listen to that like 5 times a day. But it's like a joke, like, oh, we're going to listen to it again. And then I'm like, oh, and we react, there's the humor, that building that relationship. It's a unique thing. It's very challenging, but it's like, It's beautiful, man. Yeah. I mean, it's the most significant and challenging adventure of my life, I'd say.
Sure. I agree with all those things. You know, to see them kind of hone their skills, whatever it is. My son really blossomed this year in hockey. Really got really, you know, he's always been into it, and like I've been his coach for a number of years, but seemed something like there was like a turning point this year where his interest just like is overload, and I'm, you know, all into to obliging that for sure. But it's been just seeing him on the ice progress, just like it's awesome. And just, you know, when he scores a goal, just that proud kind of moment, just like nothing beats it, right? Like,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
nothing.
When your kid is proud and they look at you and you
Yeah,
can make them feel really good about themselves, like I think that maybe that's one of the best rewards. You know.
yeah. One of the, you know, the
You
moments,
know.
like I had the COVID 2 weeks ago, and so I was out. We made it to the city championship. We had a really, really good team this year, and they made it to the city championship, and I couldn't be there as a coach. And I was just like talking to him before the game, one of the games, and he's like, "Dad, I'm going to score you a goal." I'm like, "Okay, sure." And sure enough, like I get the message from his mom, "Yeah, Kingston scored a goal." I talked to him after. He's like, "I heard you scored a goal." He's like, "Yeah, Dad, I scored one for you." And I'm like, oh, it like melted my heart when he said that. Like,
That's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the dad and son bond is unique. You know, I thought I was gonna have a girl. Like I was convinced that it was gonna be a
yeah,
girl. I was like, maybe that'll be the nice thing about it. The sweet little girl, and then it was a boy. And I was like, all right, well, let's go for it. And like, my wife grew up with two sisters in a household with like their mom and like really girly, super. I mean, I don't want to sound like ignorant or something, but you know, like never did any outdoorsy type stuff, like kind of germophobic, like rolling around in the grass is not going to happen, you know, like
yeah,
hiking, camping, none of that stuff, fishing, no way, you know. So like I get to like be a boy with him, you know, I get to show him like, hey, like, yeah, like don't wear your shoes in the house, but when we're outside, like whatever, man, like you can roll around in the sand, like I don't care. And it's a cool balance, you know, because my wife, she's teaching him great life skills in her own way, and she's super on point with the academics and all the reading and math and Chinese development and stuff. Like I have to give her full credit for all of that, and she's very loving. But you know, I have my unique role to offer, and it's cool because like he has both of us, and he was saying that the other day because he was asking a question about like how come in this story like there was only a mom. I was like, well, sometimes kids don't have both parents, you know, for different reasons. And he's like, well, it's cool that I have both parents. And I was like, yeah, like we're really happy to offer that to you because neither of us really had that. So
that's sweet. Yeah, for sure. Like, you know, same with my son. You know, he's pretty fortunate. Like, although we're separated, and I have him like a week on, week off kind of scenario. We co-parent really, really well, and we are also, you know, we're both really involved in his life. Where, you know, yeah, she may have him for a week, but I see him almost every day because it's either, you know, me coaching him for hockey or something. And so, yeah, it's important to kind of, you know, have both to be around there.
yeah, man.
Let's talk a little bit about, you know, Grim Deeds. You kind of mentioned it at the beginning. Like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, did you release something last week?
Yeah, I had a single.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm releasing stuff like constantly, or have been all this time. The way it usually goes is I'll release a single, and then maybe I'll release like a few more, and a few more, and a few more, and eventually it becomes an album, and then I'll release
Okay.
an album. It's kind of a weird model of releasing music, but it was just like I kind of saw the opportunity with Bandcamp and the way people consume music now. It's different than when we grew up, so I didn't really see the point in investing all my resources in some kind of studio recording and then like a CD. Yeah, like who's gonna buy that? Like, you know, and I still make CDs, I still make records, still make T-shirts, all that stuff. I think it's important to have all that stuff, but the kind of short attention span culture that we have now, I was like, well, I'm ready. Here's a song. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. You know, like I don't know what it is about me that I think for most people they wouldn't want to do it my way because they would want to spend more time on it or develop it more or something. But for me, it's just like I have this essential idea for whatever this song is. I'm recording it under these constraints of like time and resources, and it's like, okay, this is more or less what I had in mind. Here you go, you know, and here's another one. Here's another one. And I've been doing that for like 7 years, you know, just putting out DIY songs and to the best of my abilities. I'm not like a virtuoso on any instrument, but I've got these ideas for songs. And what the feedback that I get that I value the most is that it inspires other people to do stuff creatively. Like, oh, I never thought I could record songs, but then like your example got me stoked, and now here's my album. And then like I made a record label called Laptop Punk Records, which I've been doing for about 2 years now, and I've put out tons of stuff by guys like me, like, and women too, who are like creative and have an outlet and want to share it. So I don't know. It's kind of the whole ethos behind what I do is to prove that it's possible, and that you don't need like gatekeepers to let you in. You can just do it anyway and just barge it. It's kind of like skating too,
Yeah, it's that punk rock, DIY ethics, right? And it's like and it's no different from Rad Dads. I had the idea, came across a group in Vancouver, and I just, oh, this is really cool. And I reached out to the guy there, and he's like, yeah, you should do it in Edmonton. And then before I know it, I'm like having our first meeting, and then it's grown into this thing that was morphed from what it initially thought it would be. Here we are 5 years later, interviewing you, or interviewing Jim from Pennywise, Tommy Chong, interviewing
Brad George. Like
it's just like crazy to me to think of kind of what, but yeah, I've been inspired. And that's, it kind of maybe speaks to the passions, following your passions and looking at people that inspire you. That's kind of why you're here, right? It's like, that's why we have these interviews. The hope is people listen to them and get inspired for somehow, whether it's through music or skateboarding or art or whatever. Like, it's just it's super cool, and I like to contribute to that sort of, I guess, community.
What it shows your son is, it's like, look at what's possible. Like, if you want to do something, you can do it. There's always a way. And like, he's been drawing comics a lot lately, and I'm stoked on it. Like, he'll sit down and come up with a whole story and all the characters, and do like this 15-page comic with the characters that he's made up. They're kind of based on some of the books he's read, I think, a little bit. But I'm like, yeah, like, I'm his editor, and so he'll draw the pictures and stuff, and I'll edit like little sentences here and there, and then he's super into it. Like, he even puts like about the author on the last page, and like,
that's awesome.
Like Logan likes bunnies and he hangs out with his cousins, and I'm like, that's cool. And then one time he asked me, like, could we like make it into like a real book? And I'm like, yep, yeah, for sure. Like, you can do, like, if your goal is to be an author, you can do it. If your goal is to be a musician, you can do it. Like, whatever your goal is, there's a pathway. And I'm like, another thing I'm doing right now, when the pandemic started, I made this decision that I wanted to learn Japanese. It's like a goal I've always had, but it was just too intimidating. And I was like, but I did it, and I've been doing it for like about 1.5 years now. I've been studying the language every day, and I suck. I'm like barely able to speak anything. Like, I have like tutoring with italki once a week, and it's just like, it's the most scariest thing ever. You try speaking to a native Japanese speaker and trying to figure it out. But I'm showing him that, and he's learning Chinese. He's way better at Chinese than I am at Japanese. But it's this, like, I want him to see me struggle with it and reach higher levels and get to, like I started freestyle skateboarding recently, just flatland. Actually, kind of got inspired by that Kevin Harris interview. And I'm terrible at that. I'm a street skater, so I'm like trying to learn walk the dog and all these weird moves. And he's watching me struggle. But then I'll get something. I'll be like, check it out, and I'll show him a video on my phone. And it's cool to do that. I think it's cool to show that you're not always going to be good at something, especially when he's 6. So if he fails at something, he just wants to give up right off the bat. And I have to step in and say, like, well, you could give up, but then you're never going to reach the goal. Like, if you keep going, eventually you're going to get it. Your body will learn whatever it needs to learn. Your mind will develop, and you'll get it. And I think like the DIY spirit of the Grim Deeds and skateboarding and just punk culture in general, and like opportunities that present itself through the internet, it's all the same mindset of like, go for it. There's no, I mean, it might fail, but fuck it, like, at least you tried. And like, if you really try, if you're earnest about it, you're going to get some results.
Agreed.
That's my belief.
Last little bit here, last question. Any words of wisdom to any new dads or just old dads out there?
Well, you know, in the beginning of this interview, I said I'm a weird dad. I think I sometimes have trouble relating to other dads because not a lot of the dads that I interact with on a regular basis seem to have the same kind of like mindset as I do, of prioritizing like a weird hobby or a passion that they're always working on. I mean, it's few of them do. Like a good friend in our neighborhood, he builds trains. He builds these like scale model trains. He has a freaking railroad in his yard. And that's like his thing, man. You know, and he knows everything about trains. And he's an engineer, but he taught himself how to be an engineer. He didn't even go to school for engineering, but he works as an engineer now. So it's like, that's rad. So I relate to him, you know. But there's other dads where it's just like, I feel like, man, like, I mean, we're dads, we have that in common, but I just feel kind of sorry for them. Maybe it's my ignorance, but it just seems like they don't have that spark of inspiration. Like they don't have an outlet that feeds their soul the way that the music and the skating does for me. And I think everybody needs to have that. So maybe my advice for dads would be like, if you don't have an outlet, if you don't have something that you're always looking forward to that's separate from, or at least outside of the family life and the work career life, like get something, like get into something, work towards something, you know, work towards a goal, personal goal, because it's going to satisfy you, which is important, and it's going to rub off on everything else you do in life. It's going to be inspiring to your children. It's going to probably help you out in, you know, in all aspects, because when you strive for personal fulfillment, not at the expense of everything else, but if you can make it work, you know, within, you know, the context of your life, I think it sets a great example. And I think the rewards you get from it have positive effects on the other aspects of your life too.
Sweet. I love that answer. Let's end it there, man.
Yeah, man, this has been a really great time, and let's stay in touch, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to stay in touch.